What's up, guys? This is Rhen here with another 7 Deadly Sins Grand Cross video. Today we are going to be doing our Track in the Meta series for May 2020 Week 3. We're going to be looking at how things have changed, talk about how we think things are going to change the next week, and what you might want to consider playing. So with that, let's get into it. Alright guys, so this has been a pretty busy week in terms of things going on in the game. We've got a cool collaboration event with lots of great rewards, but of course we're still doing PvP to try to get those juicy anvils. So let's take a look at what happened in terms of our unit representation in the geared PvP meta this week. So, week 3, here we are. You can see we've had a little bit of change from last week. And this may not seem super significant, but I'm actually starting to see a little bit of a trend that I'll mention to you guys here in a little bit. So the first thing you notice is that we've got a little bit of a drop in our Gotha representation. You can see we're down a couple percent in terms of units being played, and we're down about 8% in terms of the number of matches where we saw Gotha. Same thing with King. So overall, these top two characters are really utility characters rather than, being a damage or even a damage/utility, aka a hybrid character. So we're really seeing a drop in utility and a move towards more raw damage to just apply more pressure, and we'll see a little bit more examples of that when we get into the team comp section. But for now, just keep in mind that there's going to be less Kings, less Gothers. I'm not sure what that means in terms of, advantages, because, less Gothers means less need for a King to cleanse. So we may be seeing just a little bit of a reaction there in terms of the correlation between number 1 and number 2. Escanor is continuing to be very prevalent, very common, seeing him in lots of matches. We're seeing him in over half the matches, 51% of the matches. That's up a couple of points from last week, but again, no really big shift there. Saw a little bit of a bump in Arthur and Hauser usage, and we'll talk about that in a second when we get to the team comps. Other than that, not a whole lot of change. We did see a little bit of a bump in the Merlin usage, and those I think are the main changes in terms of what units were being used this week. Now let's get into the team comps, because I actually saw something pretty interesting that I'm really curious if the trend is going to continue, or if this was kind of a one-time deal that people are testing things out. So first, let's look at team rank number 1. This has been the most commonly played team for the last 3 weeks in a row, which is Gotha, Escanor, Blue, King. We've talked a little bit about the strengths and weaknesses of this team in the past, but we have seen a slow and steady decline of this team's usage. And so I think what we're seeing is the continued evolution of people clearly like Escanor. You can see in here there's lots of teams that are either including an Escanor or even based around Escanor. We'll talk about that in a minute. Team 1, Team 4, Team 5, Team 6, Team 7. These are all including Escanor, and a couple of these are actually centered completely around the Escanor. So, people are definitely using him, but the evolution is continuing in terms of how people are using him. There's less people using him, throwing him in with the Gotha and Escanor, Gotha and King, and more people trying him out in these different comps, which I've tried this team number 1 a little bit. I didn't like it that much. It's not bad, it's good at applying pressure, but I feel like it's almost a little bit of a mismatch between the aggressive nature of Escanor and the stallish nature of Gotha and King. So I think people are just kind of finding what they like, and we're seeing the evolution of that through the meta. Team number 2, I don't know, there's a whole lot we need to say about this. It's Kingbrum. Not that we know anybody who plays Kingbrum. Alright, team number 3, Mono Red. We saw a bump in the Mono Red last week a little bit. We saw a little bit of a bump the week before that as well. We're kind of seeing that have reached its peak, and it's almost like we're seeing maybe not a Mono Red backlash, but it seems that people are perhaps moving away from the Mono Red and kind of experimenting with other variations on that, some of which will include Escanor. Right, take a look at Team 4 and Team 5. These are kind of almost both variations on the same type of teams, kind of like an Escabro archetype, which is, Escanor is on the team, and Escanor is really the main focus of the strategy. There's ancillary characters and support characters, but both teams 4 and 5, Escanor is really carrying the weight in terms of who's going to be doing work on these teams, and at least one or two of the other units are there to kind of buff up Escanor, and we're starting to see a trend towards a passive type of a buff. In terms of Team 4, we've got Hauser on here who's just going to buff Escanor's basic stats, and so no really abilities are going to be able to block Hauser's ability to buff up Escanor by boosting his basic stats. So in terms of being immune from CC, I mean, there's no kind of control from any team like a Kingbrim or anything other than that that's going to be able to stop Hauser from boosting up Escanor. And Escanor himself, of course, when he has ult, he becomes immune to CC. So people are basically using that and relying on that combination to have Escanor basically do a lot of work. So although we've seen a lot of Escanor teams in the past, this last week we really saw more of a focus on Escanor-centric teams in terms of less utility and more focus on the damage output of Escanor. One other thing I wanted to highlight was take a look at team number 8, Escanor, Arthur, Hauser. I call this the Honey Badger team because they really don't care what you do to them in terms of debuffs, in terms of crowd control, in terms of whatever. This team, the whole point of this team is they're going to buff up Escanor. In fact, when I see people play this, a lot of times Arthur will put a rank 1 or rank 2 buff on Escanor first turn, and he'll just start wrecking people's faces, because the point of this team is not necessarily to try to hold out for an Arthur rank 3 gold buff card. It's just everything on the team is buffing Escanor, and if you try to CC Escanor, they're going to get his ult, he's going to be immune to CC, and he's just going to do some more damage. So this is really kind of a minimal, very minimal utility, maximum damage output type of a setup, and that's kind of the direction that we've seen things going in the past week. And based on that trend, I'm wondering if what we might see is a continuing rise of teams like this number 8, Escanor, Arthur, Hauser. You may see things in the sub that increase damage. In fact, you may even start seeing team number 8 with things like Simon in the sub. Basically things that will increase the damage of Escanor. Alright, so what does that mean in terms of our color wheel? Well, we haven't had a huge change here. Red has been sitting right around 55% for the past couple weeks if you guys have been following. Again, we didn't really see a move on that this week. We're still right around 55%. Blue and green are trending, right around the 20 to 25% range. And we've just seen a little bit of movement back and forth between the blues and the greens. Nothing really substantial. So the meta seems to be kind of settling in on this. Again, at this point, I really think that this is due to the effect of Escanor in the meta. That's really the only explanation in my mind of why you would see red having this persistently large kind of super majority over the blue and over the green. If all other things being equal, if you see a circle like this, typically what will happen is blue will rise up to counter the red, and then once blue starts to rise up, then green will rise up to counter the blue, basically like rock, paper, scissors. But we haven't seen that, and so I think the explanation, like we talked about last time, is that the Escanor threat is really holding down people's desire to be playing blue units, because people view that as a liability, because he's going to one-shot something, and whatever that something is, hope it wasn't important to your plan, because Escanor just doesn't care. Alright guys, so I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet for you this week so you can get on with your stuff. I know you guys are busy. Hopefully this was helpful. I'd be interested to see if this is in line with what you all are seeing in your tiers. This is mostly from the Challenger rank PvP on the geared side, but I am starting to work with the partnership to collect some data on some ungeared, and so I'm hoping to bring you guys some ungeared data next week as well. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, hope it was helpful. Feel free to like and subscribe, and as always, stay tuned for more cool stuff.